Hello friends, this is Sanjay. In this video, we'll discuss about the distinction between assessment for learning and assessment of learning. We will cover school-based assessment, continuous and comprehensive evaluation, perspective and practice, which happens to be part of the Karnataka TET CDP syllabus for paper 1 and paper 2. This is a longer video and some of the topics that I will discuss in this video might be a little confusing. So you might not be able to understand or grasp everything the first time that you watch this video. If you don't understand, be patient and watch the entire video till the end. You can always rewind it and start this video again from the beginning. And the second time you watch this, you will have a better understanding of all the topics that are covered. We'll start this video by taking a look at assessment and evaluation. What are the differences between these two terms? We'll look at various types of assessment, such as assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. We will look at what is continuous and comprehensive evaluation. And we will also speak about school-based assessment. And we'll also look at the tools and techniques of assessment. And we'll end this session with some sample questions from previous question papers. So let's get started. The first thing that we will try to understand is what is the connection between assessment and evaluation. Well, assessment is more holistic in nature. That is, this is a much bigger concept and it can include evaluation. Evaluation is just measurement. That is, you are measuring the learning of a child. Whereas assessment includes the measurement of learning and also the corrective action that you are going to take on the basis of what you learn because of this measurement. For example, if your evaluation, that is your measurement, shows that there are some gaps in the learning or in the understanding of a child in your classroom, then you are going to look at the reasons behind that gaps. Right? You are going to see whether the issue is with the child or the issue is with the teaching process, and you are going to take some corrective action on the basis of the information that you got from measurement. Therefore, assessment includes measurement and the action that you are going to take on the basis of that measurement. Next, let us do a quick comparison between assessment and evaluation on the basis of some of the important points. Let's see what are the key differences between these two. Now, assessment is formative in nature because through assessment, you are trying to form the knowledge of the child, right? Because assessment can be for learning as well, right? Therefore, through assessment, you are trying to form the knowledge of the child. Whereas in evaluation, you are just trying to summarize. You are trying to look at what the child has learned. Right? You are not trying to improve the child's knowledge here. And assessment can be diagnostic in nature because it can tell you the improvement areas of the child, the improvement areas of the teacher, and the improvement areas in the teaching and learning process itself. Whereas evaluation is judgmental because at the end of an evaluation, for example, at the end of a weekly test or a monthly test or an annual exam, you will arrive at a score, right? So you are trying to judge this student is good, this student is not good, right? Therefore, you are trying to arrive at a score. Therefore, it is judgmental in nature. And assessment is qualitative because here you are not just looking at a score. You are not just looking at the what. You are also looking at the how or the why. Right? Therefore, assessment is qualitative. Whereas evaluation is quantitative because end of the evaluation you will arrive at a specific number. You will arrive at a percentage or a rank. Therefore, evaluation is quantitative. Now, assessment is process oriented. That is, you are trying to make sure that the child understands the basics properly. So, if the child is doing division, you are interested in making sure that the child is following the correct process of division. If the child makes some small error, some small multiplication error or a small calculation error, right? That's why he could not come to the correct answer. That is okay because you are looking at the process. Does the child understand the basics of what division is all about? Right? Whereas in evaluation, you are looking at the outcome. You are not interested in what process the child has used. You are just looking at whether the child has arrived at the correct answer, yes or no. Right? And assessment can be ongoing. That is, assessment is part of the teaching and learning process and it goes on throughout the year. Whereas evaluation is periodic. Think about weekly tests or monthly tests or annual tests. So it is periodic in nature. Right? Assessment provides feedback. Like I mentioned earlier, because assessment is diagnostic in nature and it provides improvement areas or tells you about the improvement opportunities, it provides feedback. Whereas evaluation just shows the completion and the shortfalls. That is, whether these chapters have been completed, yes, no, whether the child has knowledge enough to solve problems in that chapter, yes, no. So it is showing just the completion and it is showing the shortfalls. Right? It is not providing that much of a feedback. Then assessment tests how the learning is going on, because it is part of the teaching and learning process on an ongoing basis, right? So it is included in the teaching and learning process, whereas evaluation tells you what has been learned. So this is mostly post-mortem, right? This is telling you at the end of the year what the child has learned. Yes, no, that's it. And assessment happens during the learning process. As I said, it is trying to see how the teaching and learning is going on, whereas evaluation happens at the end of the learning process. That is the weekly test or the monthly test or the annual test, right? So at the end of a particular period. And in assessments, students can learn from each other, right? Whereas in evaluation, students are competing with each other, because in an evaluation, like a monthly test or an annual test, all the students are competing for a rank or a percentage, right? Therefore, there is competition. The students are not learning from each other. And in assessment, it is absolute comparison. That is, you are looking at the student as an individual. You are not comparing the student to anybody else. Whereas in evaluation, you are comparing the student to other students in the same class. That's what the ranking process is all about, right? Therefore, these are the key differences between assessment and evaluation. You can pause the video here and read all the points once more. And if you want, you can rewind this and listen to all the explanation once more so that you understand the basic differences between assessment and evaluation. To understand assessment and evaluation much better, let's look at some examples, right? Assessment can be done through class discussions as well, where you give a topic and students are discussing something within the class. So you can see whether the children have the knowledge of that particular topic, how they interact with each other, how they cooperate with each other, how they control their emotions. So you can assess a lot of things through these discussions in the classroom, right? And assessment can also be done by calling students to explain something on the board. This again tells you whether students have the knowledge on the topic, what is their confidence level, whether they are able to explain their point of view. So you can assess a lot of things through this process of calling them to explain something on the board as well. Or assessment can be done through a presentation or a project, how well they present the information, how well they explain the concepts, right? And through projects, you can also see how well they cooperate with each other. Assessment can be done through peer assessment. That is, you can ask the children to assess each other. So you will get to know what other children feel about a particular child or what kind of interaction they have. Right? So peer assessment is also a part of the assessment process. And hands-on experiments. It is whether the children have just memorized something or do they really know how to do it. So you can judge that or test that through hands-on experiments. Now let's look at evaluation. Evaluation is very simple, right? You are looking at things like weekly test, monthly test, quarterly test, midterm exam, final exam. So what was the traditional way of testing students, right? Through all these various tests at different intervals. So this is evaluation, whereas the current process is assessment, which happens throughout the year through not just tests, but all these other activities such as discussions or explanations, projects, experiments. So these are the examples of assessment and evaluation. Next, let us look at the various types of assessment. Now, if you look at all these different types that are listed on this page, you can see that the types are decided on the basis of the reason for which you are doing the assessment. For example, you can do diagnostic assessments, which are done at the beginning of the teaching learning process, because you want to know what the students have already learned and what are their strengths and weaknesses. For example, before you start the classes for grade 4, you want to understand whether students have learned whatever was taught in grade 3, right? And if required, you can do some refreshers or you can do some orientation sessions. Therefore, diagnostic is done at the beginning of the teaching and learning process because you want to understand what the students already know. Or assessment can be formative in nature as well, because if you are conducting these assessments during the teaching learning process, you are using these assessments also as a means to form the knowledge of the learners or the students. For example, by conducting activities like projects or by group discussions or by calling students to explain something on the board. One, you are trying to understand whether the students have understood the lesson, right? And you are also trying to get the students involved in the teaching learning process. So that is formative. It can also be summative. Like I said, even evaluation, even the tests that are conducted can also be part of the assessment process. And if you are conducting these tests at the end of a specific time period, it can be a weekly test or a monthly test or a midterm or an annual exam. Right? You are summarizing the learning of the students. So here students get to know what they have learned or what they have not learned. So they are going to get some rank or percentage or grade. And teachers can get some feedback, because teachers can use the feedback that they have got from the performance of the students and improve the teaching and learning process for the next batch or the next year. But students usually get just a rank or a score from these summative assessments, and they don't get any useful feedback. Next, assessment can be norm referenced as well. That is, if you are comparing the students against other students. For example, if you are looking at an entrance exam, then you want to give a chance for the top 100 students or the top 300 students to get into a particular institution or to get into a particular course. So you are comparing the students against a norm, or you are comparing the students against other students, and that is norm referenced. Then there is criterion referenced. Criterion referenced can be like CTET, where you are comparing students against a specific standard. You are not bothered about how many students pass that particular standard or how many students meet that particular standard. For example, in CTET, you are saying that there is a specific pass mark. 60% is the pass mark. Right? So now it might be that only 10% of the students meet that standard, or it might be that 80% of the students meet that standard. But if the standard is set at 60%, that is the criteria or the criterion against which you are comparing all the students. So that is criterion referenced. And then there can be interim assessment. That is, if you are doing the assessment in the middle of the teaching learning process at various intervals, right, to understand the progress of the teaching or the learning process. Right? So that is interim assessment. Therefore, if you look at these different types of assessment, they are all based on for what purpose you are doing the assessment. So pause this video here and read all these points once or twice. If required, rewind and listen to the explanation once more so that you understand all these different types of assessment, because you will see questions based on these different types of assessments. Next, let us understand the concepts of assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. Now these are three very important concepts on which you will see questions very frequently in the exam. Now, assessment for learning is where the teachers and the students participate in the assessment process, right? And the examples for assessment for learning can be group discussions, or where the teacher is calling students to explain something on the board, or students are participating in a group activity such as a project. So in assessment for learning, the students get a feedback on their own strengths and weaknesses, and the teacher also gets a feedback on how well the teaching process is going on and if it needs any modification. And the students can use this assessment activity to improve their knowledge. For example, if you call students to participate in a group discussion, and during the group discussion, the teacher can understand how well the students have understood the basics or the concepts that are being discussed, how well they interact with each other, how they can frame their answers, how they can discuss with each other, how convincing they are, right? So the teacher is getting feedback about the students are getting feedback about themselves. During these discussions, during these interactions, the students are learning from each other, therefore their knowledge is also forming. So this is formative. Therefore, assessment for learning happens during the teaching and learning process, and it can be used for forming the knowledge of the students. So assessment for is formative. And next, assessment as learning. So assessment as learning can be like the quiz or the puzzles that you will get at the end of a chapter, right? Because here the teacher is not trying to see how well you have solved the quiz or the puzzle, right? The students are solving it by themselves, then they can look at the answer, they can assess themselves. And through this, students get to know how well they have understood the particular concept, and it reinforces their understanding. And Assessment as learning can also be peer assessment. For example, at the end of a particular activity, you can ask students to assess the person sitting right next to them. So it also gives you an understanding of how students assess each other, how do they view each other. Therefore, assessment as learning is also part of the teaching learning process, but here the students assess themselves. Whereas in assessment for learning, the teachers and students both participate in the process, and the teacher is assessing the students first, and the students can also assess themselves on the basis of the performance in their activities, right? And next comes assessment of learning. So assessment of learning is nothing but evaluation, because if you are conducting an assessment at the end of the teaching and learning process and you're trying to summarize the learning of the students using standardized tests like a weekly test or a monthly test or an annual exam, right? So here you're trying to assess what has happened during that entire time period, and students get a specific grade or marks, and they can be given some ranks as well. And summative assessment can be shared with a wider community. For example, students get a particular percentage or a particular mark that can be used for admissions and for various purposes. Therefore, assessment of learning happens at the end of the teaching learning process, and it is for summarizing the learning of the students. Now, let me just repeat what I have explained so far. Assessment for learning happens during the teaching learning process, and both the students and teachers participate in this process, and both of them get feedback. Assessment as learning, only the students are mainly participating in this, and they are assessing themselves. Or assessment as learning can also happen through peer assessment, right? So here the teacher is not assessing, it's the students themselves or their peers who are assessing them. And assessment of learning uses standardized tests, and this happens at the end of the teaching learning process. So this is to summarize the learning that has happened during that entire period, and these are usually the exams that happen after a particular period. So this is assessment for, as, and of learning. The next concept that we will talk about is continuous and comprehensive evaluation. So what is this CCE all about? Well, let's look at some examples which will help us understand this concept of CCE better. Ram and Shyam were two friends. So both of them put effort in their studies throughout the year. But just before the exam, Shyam got fever, so he could not sit in the final exam. So what happened? He failed. Whereas Ram sat in the final exam and he passed. Now, if we depend only on the annual exam, then Shyam has failed and Ram has passed. But if we look at the effort that both of them have put in throughout the year, and if the assessment was done throughout the year, right, then both of them would have passed. So this is where continuous and comprehensive evaluation throughout the year would have helped. Next, let's look at Sita and Geeta. Now, Sita was a student who not only studied, but she also participated in sports and extracurricular activities, whereas Geeta focused only on studies. Now, if we look at what will be their performance only at the final exam, then maybe Geeta gets better marks and Sita will get lesser marks. But here we are looking at only the academic performance, right? So if we were to use continuous and comprehensive evaluation, then we will give weightage to not only the academic concepts, but the sports and the extracurriculars as well. So then Sita also would have got high marks, and Geeta, who has focused only on studies, she also would have got high marks. So both of them would have been rated equally if we had used continuous and comprehensive evaluation rather than just focusing on the academic evaluation. And let's look at Ramesh and Suresh. Right? So what Ramesh did was he studied throughout the year. He tried to understand the complete subject. And because he was trying to cover a vast subject, he could not do it in a very thorough manner. Right? And he got B grade in the final exam. But he had put in the effort to try and understand the entire subject. Whereas what Suresh did was he partied throughout the year. But just before the exam, he solved some previous question papers and he studied some guidebooks. And because many of the questions got repeated, he did well and he got A in the final exam. But if you actually look at it, Ramesh has actually understood the subject better. Whereas Suresh just managed to do well in that one final exam, even if he has not understood the subject so well. Right? So here, if we had used continuous and comprehensive evaluation, then we would have evaluated both of them throughout the year. And we would have seen that Ramesh is actually a better student. So Ramesh probably would have gotten A and Suresh would have gotten a B. But if we use only a summative assessment at the end of the year, then Suresh would get an A and Ramesh would get a B. So these are the advantages of continuous and comprehensive evaluation, where we can evaluate the students throughout the year. We can evaluate them not only on the basis of academics, but we can evaluate them on the basis of their participation or performance in sports and extracurriculars as well. And we are not only just using the summative assessment to see how well they have done in a specific exam, but we are assessing them throughout the year so that we can understand how well they have grasped the subject as a whole. So these are the advantages of continuous and comprehensive evaluation. So based on the examples that we just saw, you must have understood that continuous evaluation means that the evaluation is happening on a continuous basis throughout the year, right? And not just on the basis of some annual exam or monthly exam or final exam, right? So evaluation is happening on a continuous basis. And you must have also understood that evaluation is happening on a comprehensive basis. That is, we are not just focusing on the scholastic or the curriculum or the academics. We are also looking at the co-scholastic or the extracurricular activities as well. So this is comprehensive. And looking at the history of continuous and comprehensive evaluation, it was first suggested in the National Policy of Education in 1986. Right? And it was also suggested in the National Curriculum Framework of 2005. However, it was given a legal status, or it was authorized by the Right to Education Act in 2009 under Article 29(1). And it was launched as a pilot for CBSE Class 9 in the academic year 2009. And it was rolled out on a national level from the 1st of April of 2010. And currently, if you look at the NEP 2020, the continuous and comprehensive evaluation process is being further streamlined, and there are some reforms that are coming in. And these changes will continue over the next few years. So this is the history of continuous and comprehensive evaluation. It is continuous because it happens throughout the year, and it is comprehensive because you are not just looking at the curricular activities, but you are also looking at the extracurricular activities. So what are the advantages of continuous and comprehensive evaluation? Well, first of all, it reduces exam related stress and anxiety, because students are not just going to be worried about how their performance will be in the monthly exam or the annual exam. They know that they are being assessed on a regular basis. So even if a student does not do well in the final exam, that is not the end of the world, because the student has been assessed throughout the year. So that exam stress and the exam fever that we see, that will definitely be reduced through continuous and comprehensive evaluation throughout the year. Right? And it also reduces the dropout rate, because if students are failing in the monthly exam or the annual exam, right, and then eventually they tend to drop out of school. But here, because of the continuous and comprehensive evaluation, because there is assessment happening throughout the year, and the teacher also can do some additional activities or can take some corrective action wherever required. So we are not waiting till the end of the year to understand how well that student has learned something. Therefore, this continuous and comprehensive evaluation can help in reducing the dropout rate by making this entire learning process more enjoyable, right? And not just stressing out students and focusing them only on the exams. And again, here continuous and comprehensive evaluation means that there is a greater focus on learning throughout the year rather than just performance in the exams. Right? Remember the example that I told you about Ramesh and Suresh, and Ramesh studies throughout the year, but Suresh just focuses on the exam just before the exam, and he studies some guidebooks or he looks at some important questions from previous question papers and he gets higher marks. So that was unfair. So through continuous and comprehensive evaluation, we are going to focus on learning throughout the year rather than just on performance in the exams. And through continuous and comprehensive evaluation, we focus on the holistic development of learners. That is, we are not just looking at their academic performance, we are also giving importance to the co-scholastic or the extracurricular activities. And Because if you look at all of these, then this CCE will definitely promote a learner-friendly environment, because anything that makes the learning more enjoyable is learner-friendly. And these co-curricular activities and extracurricular activities will also help students equip themselves with life skills, because if you are participating in some sports, then you learn the importance of teamwork, you learn the importance of cooperation, you learn the importance of negotiation. So all these are life skills that you will learn through these co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So these activities give students an opportunity to learn beyond what is being taught in the curriculum. Therefore, since continuous and comprehensive evaluation encourages co-curricular and extracurricular activities, this is ideal for making better human beings. Therefore, these are some of the advantages of continuous and comprehensive evaluation. The image or the graphic on this page summarizes whatever we have discussed so far about continuous and comprehensive evaluation. So in CCE, you have the continuous part and the comprehensive part. In continuous part, if you look at it, there is learning which is happening, and the assessments are also happening in parallel with the learning. That is, the assessments are integrated into the teaching learning process. When we look at formative assessment, then there can be assessment as learning and assessment for learning as well. So assessment for learning is where we are focusing on the quality aspect. That is, what is the quality of the learning that has happened. And we also use summative assessment. Now summative assessment are the monthly tests or the annual tests. And here we are doing assessment of learning, where we are focusing on the quantity of the learning. Right? And on the comprehensive side, if you look at it, we are giving attention to the scholastic and the co-scholastic aspects of learning as well. That is, we are looking at the academics and the co-curriculars or the extracurriculars as well. To assess what is happening on the scholastic side, we can use formative assessments and summative assessments. And on the co-scholastic side, we are giving weightage to other aspects such as life skills, work education, or visual and performing arts, or attitudes and values, all of which will be very, very important in the future for the children. Therefore, this is what continuous and comprehensive evaluation is all about. If you want to learn more about continuous and comprehensive evaluation, then you should refer to NCERT's CCE guidelines booklet, which actually talks about how CCE can be implemented in a real classroom. The next concept that we are going to talk about is school-based assessment. Now, what is the school-based assessment? Now, to understand this, let's look at what happens in a typical final exam, right? The question paper is set by somebody else. It is printed and sent to all the schools. The students take the exam. Then the answer sheets are also evaluated by some external examiners. So here we are talking about assessment by external exams. So the basic concept of this school-based assessment is that the entire assessment is happening at a school level instead of through external exams. Because the teachers and the school who have seen the student throughout the year, they are in a better position to assess the students, and they can do it in a more holistic way rather than these external exams. So this concept of school-based assessment was first proposed in Hong Kong in the year 2000. And it was rolled out in India in the form of the Continuous and Comprehensive Evaluation through the RTE Act 2009. So in short, this school-based assessment is nothing but the continuous and comprehensive evaluation that we are talking about so far. So what does the NEP 2020 say about school-based assessment? Well, NEP 2020 essentially talks about 360-degree assessment through this school-based assessment process. That is, the assessment needs to be multi-layered and multiple sources. That is, you are using different types of assessment methods, and you are getting information from various sources to achieve this 360-degree assessment. That is, assessment can be self-assessment by teachers, by peers, and by parents as well. And we are talking about assessment of various parameters such as cognitive abilities of the child, the psychomotor abilities of the child, and we are also looking at affective assessment. So what is this affective assessment? Well, affective assessment means how the learning or how the education is affecting the students' attitudes, interests, and values. Because the end result of the education must be positive, right? If it is not affecting the students' attitudes, interests, or values in a positive way, then the education might not be of much use. So 360-degree assessment is what the NEP 2020 advocates. And it says that we can track the progress of the inquiry-based learning through modes like quiz, role play, group work, portfolios, etc., which are integrated into the teaching and learning process. And it also talks about implementing artificial intelligence-based software to track the development of the child throughout the school years. On this page, you will see a list of items which are the advantages of school-based assessment. Now, these are important because you will often see questions asking you to identify which of the following is an advantage of school-based assessment. So let us quickly go through this list. Now, school-based assessment, because it is part of the teaching learning process, it is integrated into the teaching learning process. So assessment is not separate. It is integrated in the day-to-day learning that happens in the classroom. And school-based assessment is child-centered, and it is activity-based, because you are not just using a standardized test to assess the students or evaluate the students. You are using the day-to-day activities of the children that happens in the classroom, like classroom discussions or presentations or projects, to assess and evaluate the children. So it is child-centered and activity-based. And there is a focus on competency development rather than content memorization. If it was just about passing an exam, then they would just have to memorize something and write it in the exam and they would pass. But here the focus is on making sure that the competencies are developed, their basics are developed, and they understand the concepts and not just remember it. And assessment becomes more meaningful by including self and peer assessment. That is, in a traditional assessment where you are using an exam, a standardized test, the assessment is being done only by the teacher. But in school-based assessment, there is self-assessment and there is also peer assessment along with the teacher assessment. And as we discussed previously, it is non-threatening, stress-free, and it enhances the participation and interaction of the students, because here students don't have the tension that I have to prepare for a final exam, because the assessment is happening throughout the year and they are participating in the assessment process on an ongoing basis. And here the assessment is focused on for learning and as learning, right? Because you are trying to improve the knowledge of the children through this assessment as well. And you are not just trying to test it, right? You are not just trying to test what they have learned or what they have understood. Right? So school-based assessment is focused on for learning and as learning and not off learning. Next, because there is less tension in the students and they are more involved in the assessment process, there is more faith and there is more interaction on the teacher and on the school system that they will not unnecessarily fail me. Right? And school-based assessment gives better results. Students are assessed in a better way. Therefore, it enhances the self-confidence of the children. And of course, school-based assessment will also reduce the load on the teachers, because in case of a final exam, you have to print the papers, you have to send it out, you have to collect the answer scripts, you have to evaluate it. So everything is happening in one shot, whereas school-based assessment is spread throughout the year. Therefore, it reduces the load on the teachers. So these are the advantages of school-based assessment. Let us move on to the tools and techniques of assessment. We will look at some of the most important tools and techniques that are going to be important from your exam point of view. These include assessment tests, observation, checklist, rating scale, questionnaire, interview, portfolio, project, cumulative record, anecdotal record, and case study. So you will frequently see questions related to all these different types of tools and techniques of assessment. So let's start going through them one by one. The first tool or technique of assessment that we will talk about are achievement tests. So what are achievement tests? Achievement tests are usually summative in nature, right? So these are tests which are used to understand what the children have learned in a specific period of time or from specific parts of the syllabus or specific chapters or specific topics. So these are achievement tests. Now, these achievement tests can be objective type test, essay, oral type, written type, performance test. So they can be any type of test. Now, these achievement tests can be broadly classified into two types. They can be teacher-made tests, where the teacher is actually conducting the test at the end of every week or at the end of a particular chapter, or ad hoc, that is at the middle of a chapter, to understand what children have learnt during that period of time or from those particular chapters or topics. So if the teacher is deciding the standard, the pattern, the scope, the syllabus and everything of a particular test, then these are called teacher-made tests. And the feedback from these teacher-made tests are going both to the teacher and the student, and it helps them understand what they have learnt from a specific chapter. The teacher gets to know whether the teaching learning process is ideal for this group of students, and the students get to know what are the gaps in their understanding of that particular topic. Right? So teacher-made tests, everything is being decided by the teacher. And then there are unit tests. So unit tests are more standardized. For example, you may have some specific tests at the end of every chapter, or you might have the weekly exams, or you might have the monthly exams, or you might have midterms, or you might have the annual exams. So these are all unit tests because they are designed to assess the learning of a particular unit. So in a standardized test, that is in a standardized unit test, the format of the exam, the syllabus and the time of the question paper, how it will be corrected, what will be the negative marking, all that is standardized. It is not decided by the teacher. It will be the same standard that will be followed by all teachers. So those are standardized. And these unit tests can be conducted at the end of each unit of the syllabus. They can be conducted at the end of a chapter, or they can be conducted after a particular period of time, that is at a half yearly point or at the year end. And both of these, that is teacher-made tests and unit tests, are useful in understanding the competency of the learners in a specific unit. So these are achievement tests. Very, very simple. The next technique of assessment that we will talk about is observation. Now there are several aspects to the development of a child. There are quantifiable aspects and there are qualitative aspects. Quantifiable aspects such as what is the child's performance in a particular chapter. Those can be measured through the standardized tests, and there is a marks card in which the results can be tabulated. But what about all the qualitative aspects? How do we measure the confidence level of the child? How do we measure the creativity of the child? So all such qualitative aspects can be understood through observation. Now the child is spending a large part of the day in the classroom. Therefore the teacher can observe the students, and when the teacher is meeting the parents during the parent-teacher meeting, then the teacher can give a lot of qualitative feedback. For example, your child is very good at speaking. The child is very confident, right? The child interacts very well with people in the classroom and outside the classroom as well, right? But the child's handwriting is very bad, so we'll have to work on improving the handwriting. The child is very interested in extracurricular activities like singing, dancing, drama, but the child is not participating in any sports activities. Therefore, we will have to focus on some sports activities as well. And the child is taking a lot of time into complete activities in the classroom. Therefore, we will have to work on the punctuality and the effective use of time. So all such qualitative feedback is given on the basis of observation. So the student's progress and behavior in several areas which cannot be evaluated using paper pencil tests. So all such qualitative aspects can be understood through observation. Another very important tool of assessment is a checklist. A checklist is a very simple method through which we can understand whether the child is able to follow a specific set of steps, or the child is performing all the activities that are supposed to be performed. For example, if we are trying to assess the child's computer skills, then in the computer lab, we can use a checklist to assess whether the child is able to turn on the computer, whether the child is able to log into the correct account, whether the child is able to open software like MS Paint, whether the child is able to create a simple drawing. And we see that the child is not able to save the documents properly, and the child forgets to switch off the computer, and the child is not handling the equipment in the proper way. The child is mishandling the mouse or the keyboard. So that is also something which we can understand. So using this checklist, we can understand what are the computer skills of the child. So the child is able to log in and the child is able to open the correct software, but there are some gaps that we need to address. So these are the aspects that we need to work on. Therefore, a checklist is a very simple tool that can be used to assess the performance of the child in a specific activity or a specific task. The next tool of assessment that we will talk about is a rating scale. Now, a rating scale is very similar to a checklist. As you can see here, it also has a list of items or attributes. But instead of just saying yes or no, present or absent, here we can give a specific rating for each of these parameters. For example, if we are trying to understand about the child's participation in school projects. If we say yes, we don't know up to what level. If we say no, then we know that the child is not participating. So if we are saying yes, then we can give a rating for that. In the sense, if the child is moderately participating, then we can say at a level 3. How well is the child working with his peers? The child has very good social skills, so we can mark it at 5. And leadership qualities. The child has very average or below average leadership qualities, so we can mark it as 1 or 2. And then we can say how well the child is participating in group discussions. The child is not so confident and the child is not participating well in group discussions. Therefore, we can mark it again as 1 or 2. And participation in sports. Yes, the child is very interested in sports. So instead of just saying yes, we can say the child is very interested in sports. So that will be a level 5. So that way, each of these parameters can be rated. So a checklist in which we are using a rating is a rating scale. Next, we will talk about a questionnaire. A questionnaire is something that you are already very familiar with because you would have answered questionnaires or surveys in the past. So a questionnaire can have a set of standardized questions so that all participants are answering the same questions so that their answers can be collated, tabulated, analyzed. So a questionnaire, when it has a set of questions, the answer can be either a simple yes or no, or it can be a set of selection tick boxes that they have to select, or it might ask for more information where people have to type and provide some qualitative information. So a questionnaire is nothing but a set of questions. Another very useful technique or tool of assessment is interview. So now an interview is nothing but a face-to-face interaction. So instead of using a questionnaire and giving a standardized set of questions, you can have an interview where you can use a wide variety of open-ended or close-ended questions. And here the interviewer can ask for more elaboration, more explanation, and can go in depth in specific areas of interest. And these interviews are specifically useful if you are dealing with very young children or with the people who are not literate, because they might not be able to answer a questionnaire very well. So here an interview is very useful. So interview is nothing but a face-to-face interaction with the person whom you are trying to assess. A portfolio is very important from your exam point of view as well, because almost every year you will see at least one question asking about what is a portfolio or asking about various aspects of a portfolio. Now a portfolio is a very simple concept. It is just like a big scrapbook. It can be in the form of a book or it can just be a folder in which samples of the student's work from throughout the year are collected. For example, this is a portfolio which is in the form of books. Now in each page, there is one particular activity of the child that has been captured. There are some marks cards which are captured. There are some fun activities that the child has done. There are some extracurricular activities that the child has done. There are some photographs. So activities of the child throughout the year have been sampled in this portfolio. So tomorrow when somebody looks at this portfolio, they can easily understand what the child has been doing in school throughout the year and what are the areas that the child is interested in and doing well, and what are the areas where the child is not doing well. For example, if there are lots of extracurricular activities, right, whereas the marks of the child that are shown in the marks cards are not up to the mark. So which means that the child is not doing so well academically, but the child is doing exceptionally well in extracurricular activities. So a portfolio gives a complete picture of what the child has been doing in school throughout the year. Projects or project works are also very useful in assessing children, because projects can be used for assessing both scholastic or academic performance, because if the projects are connected with some subject or some specific part of the syllabus, then they are measuring or assessing the scholastic aspects. If the projects are extracurricular in nature, then they can measure the co-scholastic or the extracurricular activities. And if children are participating in these tasks or in these projects individually, then you are assessing them individually. Whereas if they are working on these projects as a team, then you can also assess other aspects such as their teamwork and their social interactions and the knowledge and the skills that they have learned in the classroom. For example, if it is a maths related project, then the concepts of maths that they have learned in the classroom, they can use in the projects. So that way you can see whether children are able to apply the theory that they have learned in the classroom in completing a real world tasks. Therefore, projects are very, very useful as a tool or a technique of assessment. Next, let us talk about anecdotal records. To understand what is an anecdotal record, we should first know what is an anecdote. An anecdote is a short story about a real incident or a person. An anecdote is also called kissa in Hindi. Now, we already discussed about observation, right? Where the teacher is observing the children in the classroom. And the teacher is able to get information about the children's participation in academic and non-academic activities. And the teacher can capture this observation in some book saying that yes, the student is doing well in academics, the student is doing well in drama and other co-curricular activities. So the observation can lead to some brief inputs or information about the child. And we also spoke about a portfolio. A portfolio is a book or a file in which the activities of the children are captured from throughout the year. That is, they can be in the form of marks cards which show the academic performance. They can be in the form of some projects that the children have done, or they can be in the form of photographs of some of the activities that they have participated. So a portfolio captures the child's activities throughout the year. Now suppose the teacher uses this observation and writes some short stories which illustrate or which show the incidents or the activities that the child has participated in. And those incidents or stories are written in a book such as the portfolio. Then it becomes an anecdotal record. For example, the teacher might observe that the child is interested in co-curricular activities like drama or dance. And rather than just mentioning child is interested in drama, right? What the teacher does is she writes a small story about how the child has participated in a drama activity in the month of January, and the child played the part of a king in that particular drama, and the child was very confident in the way that he or she acted. So the teacher is writing a small story which gives us a lot more information than just telling us that the child is interested in drama. Right? And if this story is written in a book such as a portfolio, then when whoever reads the portfolio can not only see the photos of the drama activity but can also read the story, and that gives a lot more information, and this portfolio can now be called an anecdotal record. Therefore, observation and a portfolio together can become an anecdotal record. Next, let us talk about cumulative record. Now, cumulative record used to be very popular as a tool of assessment previously, but nowadays it is rarely used. To understand what is a cumulative record, think about the annual marks card. So the annual marks card will tell you what has been the child's performance throughout the year. What are the marks that the child has scored in different exams? What is the rank that the child has achieved in each of these exams? And what is the attendance that the child has in the class throughout the year? So such quantifiable data is captured for the entire year in an annual marks card. So a cumulative record is nothing but a document which captures a very similar data across multiple years. So if the child has studied in the same school from grade 1 till grade 5, instead of looking at 5 different annual marks cards and trying to see what has been the child's progress throughout this 5-year period, a cumulative record gives us one document which we can refer to look at all such quantifiable data, such as marks, attendance, the rank, or any other achievements of the child for this entire 5-year time period. So in short, a cumulative record is like a marks card for multiple years. Next, let us talk about a case study. Now, a case study is conducted by a teacher or somebody senior in the school, and a case study can be about a specific child, or it can be about a group of children. Now, why is a case study done? So a case study is an in-depth investigation. For example, if a particular child is not doing well in the classroom, or if a particular group of children are not doing so well in the classroom, right? Then if an in-depth study is done about the background of these children, about the environment that the children are living in outside the school, and what kind of experiences the children have had in the past and are currently having. So if a case study is an in-depth study of all such aspects of the child in the classroom and outside the classroom. So through a case study, we can understand why these children are not doing so well in the classroom. And it can also be done if the children are doing exceptionally well. For example, if there is one group of children who are doing very well in the classroom, then a case study can be done to understand why these children are doing so well in the classroom, in academics, or it might be in sports. And the information that is gathered through this case study can be used so that we can try to improve the performance of other children as well. Therefore, a case study is an in-depth study of the various aspects of the child's life so that we can understand what are the reasons behind the current behavior and performance. Next, let us solve some sample questions from previous question papers, and these questions are based on the topics that we just covered in this video. In this question, we are being asked to identify which of the following statements is correct. The first one is formative assessment can be summative also. Now there is a reason why we call some types of assessment as formative and some types of assessment as summative. They are not one and the same. They are different. So this statement is incorrect. Next, summative assessment is not as comprehensive as formative assessment. This is a correct statement. The reason why it is correct is if you look at the annual exam marks card of a child, you will just get the marks of the child in that particular exam. You will not get information on why the child has done well or why the child has not done well in specific subjects. You'll just get the marks of the child or the rank of the child. So summative assessment gives us less information than formative assessment. Therefore, summative assessment is not as comprehensive as formative assessment. Therefore, this statement is correct. Next, there is hardly any difference between formative assessment and summative assessment. This is absolutely incorrect because there is a lot of difference between formative and summative assessment. So there is hardly any difference. This is incorrect. And since all of the above are not correct because there are two incorrect statements here, so this is also not correct. Therefore, summative assessment is not as comprehensive as formative assessment is the answer to this question because that is the correct statement. School-based assessment, that is SBA, focuses on which of the following? Now, we discussed that school-based assessment is an assessment which is done at a school level rather than through external exams. And because the school-based assessment is being done by the teachers and it also includes peer evaluation and self-evaluation, so a school-based assessment is more comprehensive in nature. So a SBA or a school-based assessment can help us in diagnosing the deficiencies in the learner. This is correct. And it helps us in taking the remedial measures, that is to correct these deficiencies. What are the actions that we need to take? So SBA helps us in taking the appropriate remedial measures. This is also correct. And because SBA is comprehensive, that is, it is not just focusing on only the academics, but it is also focusing on the skills and the overall development of the child. So SBA helps us in continuously developing the skills and the competencies of the learner. Therefore, this is also correct. Therefore, the answer to this question is all of the above, since all of these three statements are correct. Assessment for learning takes into account the following except. Now, assessment for learning is part of the teaching learning process and it is used for making sure that the children actually understand what is being taught. It is not just for measuring the performance of the student in a particular test or a particular exam. Right? Therefore, assessment for learning takes into account the needs of the student. It also takes into account the learning styles of the different students in the classroom. And it also takes into account or tries to understand the strengths of the students. And it does not give a lot of importance to the mistakes of the students. Right? Through the mistakes of the students, we are trying to identify the needs of the students. we are trying to identify the strengths or the weaknesses of the students, or we are trying to identify the learning styles of the students. So while mistakes of the students are visible through assessment for learning, it does not give too much importance to mistakes. Therefore, it takes into account all of these except the mistakes of the student. To make assessment a useful and interesting process, one should be careful about which of the following. So we have to identify which of these statements is correct and which will help us in making assessment useful and interesting. Now, if we make comparisons between different students, like it is done in a summative assessment like the annual exam marks card. So this is not useful and not so interesting for the students. They'll just get to know what is their marks and what is their rank in the class. So this is not the best answer. Next, labeling students as intelligent or average learners. If we call some students as intelligent, then that boosts their confidence, whereas the children who are labeled as average learners, we are actually reducing their confidence levels through these labels. Therefore, this is also not the best option. And using technical language to give feedback. So if we use very highly technical language or technical jargon to give feedback, then that is also not useful, because the children and their parents might not be able to understand what you are trying to say. So the feedback has to be in simple language which everybody can understand. Therefore, this also is not the best option. That leaves us with one option, that is, to make the assessment useful and interesting, we can use a variety of ways to collect information about the students, both scholastic and co-scholastic activities. So we are not just looking at the academic performance, we are also looking at the co-scholastic or the extracurriculars. Therefore, option 3 is the best way to make assessment useful and interesting for all the parties. Continuous and comprehensive evaluation emphasizes on which of the following? Now this is a little tricky question, because we can see that there are more than one possible correct answers. The first one, redundancy of the board examination. No, continuous and comprehensive evaluation does not make the board examination completely redundant. Board examination has its own purposes and reasons. Therefore, this is something which is an incorrect statement. Next, continuous testing on a comprehensive scale to ensure learning. So here we see that continuous testing on a comprehensive scale to ensure learning. This is a correct statement. Next, how learning can be observed, recorded and improved upon. Yes, this is also a correct statement, because when we are trying to do continuous and comprehensive evaluation, we are trying to understand how the learning that is happening in the classroom can be observed, can be recorded and can be improved. Therefore, this statement is also correct. And fine-tuning of the tests with the teaching. This statement is also correct, because by continuous and comprehensive evaluation, the information that we get, we can fine-tune the tests that we are giving so that they can capture better information about the students and about the learning process. Therefore, this statement is also correct. Now here, we have to identify which of these three statements is the most appropriate for this question. And that is option 2, that is continuous testing on a comprehensive scale to ensure learning. So here we are doing continuous testing, we are using a comprehensive scale, and we are also trying to ensure that learning is actually happening in the classroom. Therefore, this is the best answer among the given options. And with that, we come to the end of this video. If you have any questions or feedback, please put them in the comment section below. And please do give this video a like and subscribe to this channel. And you can also share this video with your friends. And I will see you again in the next video in this series, and we will cover one more topic in the CDP syllabus. Till then, take care, stay safe.